All right, let's give it a few more seconds. I saw one or two more coming in.
Welcome, welcome.
All right, that's a few more seconds. All right, well, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Terrell France. I'm a professor at Harrisburg University, and I'm the moderator today for the workshop, Writing Your Statement of Purpose for Graduate School. I'd like to welcome you. And without further ado, let's turn it over to our professor here, our expert in writing a purpose for grad school applications. I'd like to introduce you to Cami Valdez. She's a professor in chemistry at Northeastern State University. Cami, it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with y'all today to talk about applying to grad school and specifically about the statement of purpose, which you all will spend a lot of time on in your application process. So we'll start with some introductions. I'd love to see who's in the room today with us. So if we could use the chat, if folks can tell us where are you coming from and what year are you? I'd love to hear a little bit from you all so we can get some participation going. So please put some info in the chat. If there's any brave souls who want to unmute themselves and introduce themselves, I'd love for that as well.
Hello.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Zaria Patrick, and I am a sophomore chemistry major at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Sorry, I don't have my camera on.
That's okay. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Emilio Moreno. I'm a sophomore at Madison College in Madison, Wisconsin, and I am on the pre-med track.
Okay, great. Not seeing anybody in the chat. Maybe we could get a third volunteer. Just introduce yourself, hear where folks are coming from.
Hello.
Hey everybody.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Maria Fratinardo. I'm a student at Chaminade University in Honolulu, Oahu. I'm in my last semester of my undergrad studying data science and analytics.
Great, thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Plasky. I go to UW Milwaukee. I'm going for mechanical engineering.
Okay, great. All right, so there's quite a diversity in fields represented here, as well as places that you all are coming from. So it's wonderful to see that there's so many folks from all across the U.S. Attending today, and then those that'll get to watch this on recording as well. My training was in chemistry, in undergrad. Chemistry and math is what I did my bachelor's degrees in, and then I did my PhD in biomedical sciences. And so not quite covering all of the fields here, but some of the folks that are represented. And so excited to talk to you all a little bit about this grad school application process, which sometimes can feel like a little bit of a black box. I also want to share that I am OK LSAMP alum. So I was actually an LSAMP scholar as an undergrad when I was at Southwestern Oklahoma State University. So I was in your shoes many years ago when I was an undergrad. And so I know how much the programming that LSMRCE and LSAMP offer. So just want to make sure that I acknowledge that, because that's how I got to where I've been. So all right, so thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves, and we'll jump into our agenda now. So we're going to talk just a little bit about getting started with the grad school applications, kind of that process. We'll talk briefly again on the application process, specifically on the timeline. And then finally, the bulk of this presentation is really going to be focused and honed in on those application components, and specifically that personal statement or statement of purpose. All right, so like I said, we'll start with the getting started part and talking a little bit about why grad school, how to identify programs of interest, and then getting organized with the process. So on the why graduate school, I'd love if a couple of you could put into the chat why you're interested in pursuing graduate school. What is it about grad school, that draws you to do more school after you finish your bachelor's degree? What's motivating you to keep going? Why grad school? So if we could get some folks entering in the chat, let's get some conversation going here.
I believe that the chat is disabled.
I think so too. I was going to say, I
Yeah.
think that maybe because of the Whova app, it's actually not. So if there's anybody that's willing to share, maybe unmute, maybe we could get 2 or 3 examples. I'd love just to hear what's bringing you here today. Why grad school? Yeah. Not all at once.
I think I'm in my last semester of college or my undergrad.
Yeah.
I'm in this session because I still haven't quite figured out yet if I want to go to grad school.
Okay.
I definitely, I think, want to work once I graduate in my career, in my what I'm getting my degree in, and then you know, for a few years, and if I do come to that point where I realize I do need more education, then I would take the next steps into grad school.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm still trying to figure out if grad school is something that I want to pursue.
Okay. That's great. I'm sure you're not alone in that thought. Can we get 1 or 2 other volunteers to share why you want to go to grad school if you know that you want to go?
Hi.
Hi.
For me, thank you. I would like to go to PA school. And
Okay.
in order to be a practicing PA, you have to have the master's degree.
Yes.
And because it is a very competitive and rigorous cycle, I would like to learn how to set myself apart, just be very personal in my application and my letter, and just be able to achieve what I want to achieve and go to the school that I want to go to.
Okay, great. Thank you. Need 1 more volunteer and then we'll jump in.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, I'd like, hi.
Hi, go ahead.
I'd like to go to grad school because, oh, sorry. I'm like, can you hear me okay?
I
My
can hear you.
speakers
Yep.
might not be great. Okay, good. So, hi everyone. I'm Ashley Odom, and I'm coming in from Washington State out of Pierce University or college, sorry. And grad school is really important to me because I'm a Black woman and I'm a first generation college student, and these opportunities were not available to everybody before me. I feel like it's a duty to my community to, encourage that growth and development in STEM fields. I'm not sure what graduate school looks like for me yet. I'm still getting my associates in science to
Okay.
transfer to chemistry or mathematics. But I think that it's just really important that we have more women of color in STEM.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was one other who was trying to, I think, start talking at the same time as Ashley. If you wanted to go ahead and unmute, you can go ahead and then we'll.
Yeah, that was me. My
Okay,
name is
thanks.
Liliana. I'm a senior at UW Milwaukee, and I'm majoring in microbiology. My mix or like my reasoning as to why I wanted to go to grad school is a mixture of the last girl that was talking as well as the guy that was talking before that.
Okay.
The only way that I can get into the career that I want is through getting my master's program. I want to get my master's in anesthesiology, and like I'm Hispanic and I like first generation as well. So really like influenced by having more women within STEM, especially like minorities within STEM as well. So yeah, those are my big reasons as to why I want to go.
Yes, and this is the perfect community to kind of have that conversation with, right? So I'm so glad that you all have been able to find this conference and attend, and be sure to connect with alumni, LSAMP alumni who are here. And with the 30th anniversary, we have even a bigger LSAMP alum presence. So I encourage you to, reach out and connect with folks through the Whova app to make sure that you're plugging in with people who've been in your shoes and gone on, to do been successful in graduate school and beyond. So these are really great reasons to go to grad school. There's no specific one reason why to go to grad school. For some folks, it's going to be about, career and opportunities and money, right? And for others, it's because it's important to your community and that you're representing your identity in the STEM fields. And for others, it might just be, listen, like science is really cool and I want to keep studying it and I want to keep asking questions. And there's many other motivations out there, but I really appreciate all of you for being willing to be vulnerable and share with us your rationale for why you want to go to grad school. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to find those programs of interest. This is my recommendation for PhDs specifically. So I do want to give that caveat because I know we have folks interested in all types of programs here, that I would recommend for the PhD that you're aiming to get 8 to 10 schools or programs of interest that you want to apply to. And within those schools or programs of interest that you would want to identify at least 3 faculty in each program or school that you are interested in working with. And that's again on the PhD side of things because you would be doing research with those faculty members. And so you need to identify them ahead of time, who you would be interested in working with. And then getting organized is really important in the process. Once you start, getting into the process of applying for graduate school, there's a lot of things to keep straight. You may still be, in your undergraduate degree. And so you've got classes and other things going on. You may also be working or doing research, right? So there's a lot going on in your life. And so the organized part is really important to help you navigate that process, but also to help your recommenders with that process. And which brings us to the last one, which is lining up your recommenders. So you want to do that early. Make sure that you give your recommenders plenty of time to get their letters in for you. And we'll come back to that at the very end. Researching graduate schools. And again, this is very PhD focused since we were talking about LSAMP and the goal of LSAMP is to go on to that PhD. And so these are a number of different factors that you might bring into your decision about what type of graduate school you want to go to. So when we talk about topic, that's really around research that you would be conducting as a PhD. Location, I think, is really important. You want to be happy in that place if you're going to be spending several years there. Master's degrees, 1 or 2 years, depending on the program. But for a PhD, you're talking about an average of 6 years. So you want plenty of, things in the area that are going to make you happy and give you life outside of the lab, right? Funding is also important. So what is the funding package or what is the financial aid that's offered if you're talking about master's degree? What kind of opportunities are there, or is there, opportunities to teach or do research and things for pay? And the master's side on the PhD, of course, you want to get a fully funded PhD where that they pay you to go to school. We just had a session on that with LSMRCE. So if you weren't in attendance for that, I recommend you go and watch the video recording of that, where we just talked about funding and how to fund your PhD or get your PhD for free. Other things to consider are the different support services that might be available at the institution. Do they have free tutoring? Do they have, student groups, affinity groups, right? Like Black scientists and engineers, or Latinx, students in science, or whatever the group may be, right? Are there things like that at that institution that are going to help support you and help you navigate that process? Also looking at the coursework, does the coursework interest you? Are there enough electives if you're interested in kind of choosing your own path, or do they have kind of a core curriculum that you're going to pursue and you don't get much choice in that, and that's okay, right? But you want to look at that coursework also. How many classes do they require? And any other unique aspects that the program may have. Time to completion, of course, is important, especially when we talk about the PhDs. Again, I just said the average PhD is about 6 years. That is going to be program dependent. There are some programs where, 5 or 5.5 is going to be the norm, and it also might be discipline specific. So if you're doing something more computational, it's usually a little bit less time. If you're doing something more biological, it might be a little bit more time, depending on your model and what you're doing in that work. And then, of course, you want to know about those faculty, who you might be working with, and You can talk to your mentors to help you identify faculty who might be good for you to work with, who, you know, are in your field, in your area of interest. So these are a bunch of things to consider when you're trying to figure out which schools that you're going to apply to. So you want to give it a lot of thought and be sure that you bring all of these in to make a holistic decision that's really going to support you, not just in the science and the research that you're going to be doing, but you as an individual, right?
Tammy,
And yeah.
can I interrupt and ask a question? This is
Oh,
Terrell, the
please.
moderator.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for a person thinking of going to graduate school,
Yes.
or, you know, when you're in high school, you had that notion of a reach university, and then
Yes.
one that you thought you were comfortable you could get into, and then a safety schools.
Yes.
Is that the same kind of model an aspiring graduate student should be thinking, or should they really be just looking at those reach schools? I
That's a
mean, the
great
notion of a safety school, does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So, I mean, I think that it's really an individual choice, right? And I think, again, talking to your mentors, right? The faculty who you work with at your institution or who you've done research to kind of gauge, you know, given my, you know, GPA, my research experiences, et cetera, like where should I be aiming? And that's a really hard question. And for me, I think when I think about the PhD, you really want to find the schools and programs who have faculty who you're interested in working with. So it's not as much about the brand name as it is about the research, right? There could be somebody at a lesser known institution who's doing really phenomenal research in your area that it's like, it wouldn't make sense to go to one of those like fancy private elite schools, right? And I say that as somebody who has a PhD from Harvard. So, you know, I know that, you know, those names carry weight, and that's important too. But also, I think when we think about LSAM scholars, right, you all are students of color who are doing research, who are funded, right? You all have a scholarship already that is supporting you and doing this work. And so you are competitive at those top schools as well. So, you know, you want to be, I think that, you know, you have to have a lot of conversations and kind of try to figure out where you're at. But I think, you know, a mix of different types of schools can be helpful. I don't think there's any safety schools when you're talking about a PhD. You know, I think that you want to find the schools that have the research. The research is really, for me, the most important, but I would be interested to hear what your thoughts are as well. If you want to unmute yourself again.
You talking to Terrell or to the others? Sure.
To Terrell.
Oh, no, yeah, I think, I mean, my path has already been carved out, but I would agree. And when I think back to what I was doing, there were no safety schools.
Right.
I didn't think that way. And I was thinking towards the professor or in their particular research, actually. So I'm glad I asked the question, but I like the answer.
Okay, good. Okay, great. And we can
Thank
talk
you.
more about that if the students have questions about that when we get to the end. But do feel free to stop me if there's things along the way that you have questions about, because I want to make sure that we get your questions answered as we continue in this session. So as you think about these research schools, and this goes right along with this conversation, you need to do a lot of networking. So right now you're at this conference. So that's a great way to network and find out about more graduate schools. You know, you want to make lots of connections, and you're going to talk to your faculty mentors. So the people that you do research with. You can also talk to your LSAMP program director or coordinator. Career services at your home school can also help you with trying to identify graduate schools of interest. Alumni from your home institution as well, people who've been through your program, where have they gone on to talk to them, talk to them about their experiences. And then, of course, the LSAMP community. So being part of this LSMRCE conference, there's lots of LSAMP alumni attending this conference. And so you can find out, where did they go to grad school? Ask them about their experience. Were they glad that they chose that school? What would make, if they could go back, would they do it again, right? Those are types of questions you can ask them and try to figure out if that might be a good fit for you as well. So there's lots of networking to do to try to identify those schools of interest. And then there's the getting organized piece. And I told you all that this is really important, especially when you have so much going on between school, maybe work, and, research, not to mention this, big application that you're trying to prepare to go to graduate school. And so I recommend putting together a spreadsheet, and this will be in the resources for this session. There's a template that I'll share with you. And so what you can do is put together, and all of these fields are already in there. But this again is geared more towards the PhD. So if you're applying to other programs, make it your own and figure out, how that makes sense for you. So I have application deadline, what school or institution, what's the department or the program name, faculty of interest. So you might identify some faculty that you're interested in working in their lab, because, once you start looking at these schools, the number and the list can get really, really big and hard to remember back to, oh yeah, who was that person that did that really cool, okay, what school, right? And so this helps you to just keep track of all of that. Anything unique about that program that maybe will help you, talk about it more specifically in your statement of purpose. Information about the statement of purpose. How long are they looking for? About 2 pages, 1,000 words, 1 to 2 pages. So 2 pages is really kind of the norm for this. But you want to make sure you get the right information for each school, because each school is going to be different. There's other uploads or essays. You could put that information here. How many letters of recommendation? Who are going to be your letters of writers, which we'll come back to again at the end. And then the mechanism for them to upload that letter. Typically now it's just a link sent over email to them for them to plug in that letter. Any application fee that's associated with applying to the program, and then can you get a fee waiver? So many of the institutions actually have fee waivers for LSAMP and McNair scholars. So you want to try to figure out where and how to access those, but you need to do it early. So again, getting organized early on will help you with that process. And so again, we're going to talk briefly now about that application process and the timeline. And then really, we're going to spend most of the rest of the time here talking about that statement of purpose. So just real briefly, this is not updated. Sorry about that. So we are going to think about the fall 2021, where that you might take the GRE, and we'll talk about GRE later. You're going to identify those schools that we were just talking about, and then you're going to go through the application process. And then over winter, you're going to do your interviews. Once you start hearing back from schools in the spring, then you'll have decisions to make once you've gotten that notification that you've been admitted. And then in the summer, you'll have a choice. Of course, you can relax and hang out before you go to graduate school, or you might be wanting to finish up some research. And then finally, fall 2022, you would actually start graduate school. And so this is like the high level timeline process for this, but we will talk a little bit more primarily about this section here, applying for the rest of this talk. And so we're going to talk about these application components and really hone in on personal statement or statement of purpose, which are really interchangeable. And so let's talk about that. So for the personal statement or statement of purpose, again, it depends on the school, whether they call it one or the other. There are occasionally some schools that'll ask you for both, in which case they are looking for something different from your personal statement than what we are going to talk about today. But for the most part, they use them interchangeably. Sometimes schools even call them a statement of intent now instead of statement of purpose. And so this is a 2-page document that is really your opportunity to tell the school why they should choose you, right? This is your opportunity to convey to them how that you're prepared, how that you're ready, how that you are going to be a good fit for their program. And so as you think about this personal statement or statement of purpose, these are some questions that I'd recommend you ask yourself. So, where are you coming from? why have you chosen to apply to this program? So you want to get some specificity in there. What about this program is interesting? And then what is your career goal? So why do you need this graduate degree in the end to actually be able to, go on to do what it is you're hoping to do in your career, right? And so the statement of purpose really, or personal statement, really focuses on what I think of as the intellectual and the research. So this is very different from undergraduate applications. So if at your undergrad, you had to write some essays for the admissions process, this is going to be very different from that, right? We are not going to tell some type of story or hyperbole about coming to some type of, decision for why you wanted to pursue graduate school. Instead, you're really going to convey, again, how that you are intellectually prepared through the courses and the research that you have done, how that you are passionate about research and want to study something really, in depth in science, right? And so this is a chance for those faculty to figure out if you're an intellectual fit for their department. So by explaining the research that you've done and the research that you hope to do, you're trying to convey to them that the research that you're interested in aligns well with the faculty that are in that department or that program. And of course, you're going to tailor it to that university or department by, again, citing specific examples of how you are a good fit. And so that might be by, talking about the faculty members and the work that they're doing and how that you're interested or how that your previous research does align with that, picking out a piece of that and saying, oh, well, I know how to do XYZ, type of analysis. And that might be beneficial to Professor so-and-so's project on, whatever it may be. And so you want to make sure that you're, again, tailoring it to each university or department and not just giving kind of a blanket statement of purpose that you submit to everyone. And so I challenge you to really think like the committee here. So, the committee is first we have to talk about who is the committee, right? Who are these people making the decisions? And so the folks that are making the decisions are faculty members, and not just any faculty members. They are STEM faculty members, and not just any STEM. They're going to be in your specific field, right? So if you're interested in immunology and you're applying to immunology PhD programs, those are going to be immunology PhDs who are reading your application, right? It's going to be that niche. If you're applying to broader things like, if you're applying to chemistry, okay, it may not be all biological chemists or all physical chemists that are reading your essay, because, the inorganic people or the organic people may also be reading it. But they tend to try to get them as closely, related to whatever the topic is that you're hoping to pursue. So you can expect it to be somebody who is an expert or near expert in whatever it is that you're pursuing. And so you're writing to that audience. And so it is okay to, in this case, to use some jargon in your application, but of course you don't want to use jargon for jargon's sake, right? Use it as necessary, right? But you don't have to go in and explain like, what is a protein, right? Like they know what a protein is, right? So that level of, kind of explaining your research isn't necessary, or what you're hoping to do isn't necessary. And so remember who the audience is as you think about this, and also that, what are the types of things that faculty care about, right? So the commonality that we have, of course, is a science that you're interested in pursuing. But then beyond that, just remembering that, they're trying to choose the next generation of folks that are going to, continue this type of work. And so you're trying to convey that in your application. So some additional preparation that you can do in thinking, if you're somebody who journals, I recommend, using these questions. Again, these will be posted after this session, journaling, try to answer these questions, do some exercises of just free writing and thinking about these questions. Or if you're somebody who's a little more, illustrative, an exercise that I like to do with my students is do a mapping of your educational journey and put in there, people and things that were significant in your educational journey, and then try to parlay that into, a 2-page document in which you explain how that you could be a great fit for a grad program, right? But these are some questions that you can kind of pose to yourself. So what abilities or traits do you possess that will assist you as a grad student and as a researcher? Reflect on your personal and research and academic goals, as well as your professional accomplishments, right? And then it's not clicking forward. Let's see if we can get this. Okay. Ask yourself why you are applying and potentially enrolling at particular schools. So I think this gets back to the question of, as you think about the schools that you're going to apply to, make sure it's somewhere you'd want to go, right? So at the end of the day, if we think about this idea of safety schools, you don't want to apply to a school that at the end of the day, one, you're paying, $70 to $100 for the application, and that you wouldn't go, right? If that was the only school that admitted you, if you wouldn't go, there's no sense in applying, right? You're wasting your time, you're wasting your faculty recommenders time, and you're wasting the time of the committee. So make sure that you're able to answer this question. Why are you applying and potentially enrolling at that school? And so you want to make sure that it's one that you're confident that you would want to go to. And then think about also, how do you complement your CV? So you don't want to totally just reiterate everything that's on your CV, but at the same sense, if there's something that's important in your CV, you want to make sure that you are highlighting it here in your statement of purpose or personal statement, because you don't want them to miss it if for some reason they didn't look that closely at your resume or your CV that you're submitting with your application. And of course, you also want to be highlighting the fact that you are an LSAM scholar. This is a distinction. This is an honor. This is a really amazing group of students, and faculty have seen LSAM scholars who've gone on to do really amazing things. And so this is a chance for you to also highlight that and tell them that you're part of this really distinct and pretty prestigious group. Okay, a few more questions in here. And so I'm not going to read them all, but you can, if you download the slides after, you can take a look at these, but continuing to kind of reflect on your experiences that you have. Okay. All right. So as you think about this statement of purpose, some things that you definitely want to include is a not too personal narrative. And so that's a little confusing because it's called personal statement often, sometimes called statement of purpose, sometimes called statement of intent. But when it's called a personal statement, then you think, okay, they really want to hear about my personal journey. And instead, what the personal statement or statement of purpose is, again, is your intellectual you, right? And so I recommend using what I call mini abstracts for this. And so this is a way to kind of convey your research. And so we'll talk about that a little more in depth in just a second. You also want to talk about your reason for applying to this particular program. Again, getting back to that specificity, you want to make sure that they know that you are aware of all of that, what that program has to offer. And then you also, of course, want to highlight any qualities or skills that make you a strong candidate. And then we will talk briefly about explaining blips. So if things come up that you're like, I'm worried that, they're going to see this and I'm not going to get into the grad program, there are ways to explain things to help you with your application. And so we'll talk about how to do that. So on the not too personal statement. You want to create a narrative for faculty to better understand you. And so through this, you're going to talk about how that you came to be so interested and passionate about the research that you're hoping to pursue in graduate school. And you also, you want to make it interesting, but not in a way that sets you apart in some kind of, this is a strange essay way, right? So this is not a prose essay in the way that an undergrad essay is. And so you want to make sure that you're not trying to go in the wow factor, like, you're not needing to bring in quotes from Aristotle or anything like that, right? So you can make it interesting and unique to you as an individual, because you are, but you don't need to make it so interesting that it's like, this is strange. Like, why did they write this? So it is a fine balancing act. And so you're going to need lots of eyes on this document to make sure that, you know, that you're on the right track for sure. I don't know why it keeps going back to this. I'm sorry. Okay. All right.
Well, Cami, some review never hurts. So that's actually.
There we go. Thank you. All right. And so you want to be sure to state your goals and purpose of applying to the program. And so as we talk about PhD specifically, your first goal, of course, is to learn about the field, right? You have to learn more about the field. And then your second goal is really that you're going to advance your passion for that field. And so this is not a mystery. This is not a surprise. These are going to be the things that you're wanting to accomplish as part of your PhD. And then, as promised, I want to talk about these mini abstracts, because this is really to me, the meat and potatoes of the personal statement or statement of purpose. And so mini abstracts are an opportunity for you to talk about the research that you have conducted. And so for this, what you're going to want to do is be sure to mention your advisor. So the PI that you worked in their lab and what institution, because you may or may not have done, research at your home institution in addition to other institutions. So make sure to include that. You also want to include the background and the big picture, the why do we care? And the why do we care matters so much, because even though folks who are reading this are going to be from your field, they may not be interested in the exact same topic. Excuse me. And so you need to frame the why do we care? And I've seen a lot of personal statements where folks just jump right into, like, protein XYZ, interacts with, substrate, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but why? Or why do we care? Why are we asking this question? What's the context? And so I'm going to make sure to set that up and frame that for people to say, like, we're interested in this disease, or maybe we're just interested in a basic science question, but we think that it's really important mechanism to understand something, right? So giving us a little bit about, kind of the larger context of either what the lab does or what the project might have been situated around. And then you want to talk about, of course, the actual project that you conducted and the methodology that you used. And so as you talk about your project, you want to talk about, of course, your hypothesis. So you've framed it, you've given it a big picture, like this is a question we're trying to ask. So if this were in my lab, my students might say, the Valdez lab is interested in diabetic retinopathy, the eye disease, and diabetes. We're very interested in asking questions around vascular biology and the way that these two cell types, pericytes and endothelial cells, interact together. We hypothesize, right? So then we bring in our more scientific terms. We hypothesize that, something about the interaction between these two cell types is really key to the degradation that happens in the vasculature, microvasculature in the eye. And so my project was to write blah, 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 right? And so you framed it, and now you're bringing the audience along with you so that they understand the project. And so then as you talk about the methodology, you're not going to talk about the methodology in so much detail that we're saying, like, in my lab, like the students make an elastase solution that's like, there's EDTA in there, and there's, it's in PBS, and there's, I think, some, trying to remember what else. I haven't made the buffer myself in quite a while because now all my students do it. But, you're not going to say like, oh, this is the solution we use. Instead, you're going to say, I performed elastase digest, which allowed us to isolate the vasculature. You're not going to say, if you were doing protein work, you wouldn't say like, I loaded, 5 micrograms of protein into the wells, and, lane 1 was this, lane 2 was this, right? No, you're going to say, I did, Western blot analysis to determine, protein presence or absence or whatever it may be, right? So you're giving them high level, description of your project, not that fine detailed. And so you don't want to get lost in the weeds is really what I'm trying to say here. If your finding is going to go to publication, or if you did a presentation, you want to be sure to mention that. But you also, of course, you want to talk about your findings. So what did you actually find from your project? So what were those results that you were able to come up with, if you were able to get results, which doesn't always happen in science. And then, of course, you really, really want to talk about what you learned in the process. So what you learned as a scientist. Did you learn how to be independent? Did you learn how to design experiments? Did you learn how to do data analysis? Did you learn that you're comfortable with failure? And that's a great skill for scientists. So those are the types of things that you also want to be sure to include in these mini abstracts talking about your research experiences. And then I did want to spend just a second talking about Blip. So I think you should never self-select out of a program. Again, I will say that again, you should never self-select out of a program. So you want to identify what the problem was, isolate it, and I recommend that you have your recommenders address it if at all possible. But if your recommenders cannot address it for you, then you can go ahead and take that on yourself. And so an example of this might be if you had a GRE score that was not quite what you had hoped. In this case, it's about quantitative skills. And so an example, although I think this is slightly too wordy, but an example might be to say my quantitative scores are not indicative of my ability to perform in the quantitative sciences, as demonstrated by my exceptionally high grades in calculus and other math courses throughout, and here you could just say college experience. My quantitative skills have been developed thoroughly. And so you've addressed the issue of, my quantitative skills and my GRE didn't show up the way they should have. I've done really well in math. I know that I can take this on. It's even better, of course, if your recommender could say this for you and say, listen, their GRE scores were not really representative of what that I know that this student can do in the quantitative areas. And so, they have had, XYZ grades in their math and other, calculus courses. And so, they've got what it takes to do it. But if you have to explain it, this is a way that you could do it. And so wanted to give you an example for that. Of course, programs always are seeking diversity, so be sure to, share about yours. Everyone who's in LSAM brings to the table with them really diverse and interesting background. There is, of course, additional funding that can be available for students from underrepresented backgrounds, and that's, both in training grants that they may have and other types of opportunities. So you want to highlight, again, both that you're an LSAM scholar, but some about your unique background. And so include that in your personal statement. Once you have that personal statement drafted, be sure to have lots of folks read it, your faculty, your program directors or program coordinators, your advisors, your mentors, everyone that should be reading this. Go through lots of drafts. And then once you have a near final draft, that's when you can give it to your recommenders, would be my recommendation. In the interest of time, I don't think we're going to have time to talk about this because I want to see if there are questions at this time. And so, yes, is it Della?
Yes, I just wanted to find out, how do we download like the presentation? You were talking about something like that.
Yes, great. April, are you able to answer that question for us?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Where can they download the presentation?
Go to, did you upload your?
I'm going to do it right after.
To resources?
Okay. I'm going to do it right after. Yep.
Okay. So if you upload your any kind of resource that you want to share with the students, go ahead and upload them to resources, and then they should be able to download it from there.
Great.
And then let me know if you have any trouble uploading. I can connect you to the IU Conferences help desk.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Yes. So I will have all of these slides up, and they include some that were hidden slides, so there's even more content on here for you all that you will get. But because we were focusing on the statement of purpose, I want to make sure that we covered that really in depth today. And then there's more information on the other application components in here that you can take a look at, but also there's other questions, and I've got my contact information up here. So please email me with questions you have about the application process, or find me on social media. My handle is at Dr. Cami Valdez on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So what other questions do we have in the last couple minutes?
Please, can I ask a second question real
Yeah.
quick? So with the PhD programs, a lot of schools want you to contact professors and see if the professor has funding before you apply. So if the professor doesn't have any funding, then that means like you cannot apply. So how do you contact the professor? And like in case the professor says, I do not have funding to take in like new students, do you still try your luck and apply to the school, or like you just leave the school and move on?
That's a great question. Yeah. So some programs want you to contact faculty in advance. Others, say, listen, contact me after you've, been admitted, right? And so it definitely depends on the field and the school, what they want you to do. So make sure that you are finding that information if it is available online before, you bombard all the faculty. But if it is a program that says, please contact them and find out if there's funding in advance, then, I would send them a very polite email. I would read one or two of their papers if you have the ability, minimally read the abstracts, to be able to reach out and say, I'm really interested on your research on, XYZ. I'm planning to apply to grad school, planning to apply to blah, blah, blah program at your institution, and wanted to see if you might, if you're taking on new graduate students. And I think that's it, that, it doesn't need to be super lengthy. Faculty get like hundreds of emails a day. And so you may not get any response. If 2 weeks goes by and you haven't heard back, maybe reply to that thread very politely and say, hey, I just, you don't say, hey, you say, dear Professor so-and-so, or dear Dr. so-and-so. You say, I was interested, wanted to circle back to see if you had received my previous email. I'm very interested in your lab, and wondering if you're taking on new students, right? And so you just summarize real succinctly in the second email. But I do want to warn you, so that you don't think it's anything about you, that faculty may not always reply to you. And again, it's because the volume of emails that they get is just too high. And so it is not personal. And I want to make sure that all of you know that, because as a person of color in STEM, a woman of color in STEM, I know that can sometimes feel like, oh, it must be because I'm not ready, or I'm not prepared, or I'm not qualified in some way. And that is not the case at all. It's like bandwidth issues, right? My PhD advisor used to write her these like novels of an email, and she would write back THX Pat. So she didn't even write out the word thanks, and there was like no acknowledgement of like any of the things that she, in the email, but the acknowledgement was thanks, right? That she received it. And so, and I was in her lab as a PhD student, and that's just, faculty just don't, their time is so limited. So I just want to make sure that you all know that.
Thank you.
Cami,
Yeah.
I'd like to second, as a white old man, I'd like to second. I'd like to second that.
Thank you.
I get literally one email every second. So it's not personal.
It's not.
Do check back.
Yeah, because like a lot of professors do not actually answer emails.
Yes. Are there any other questions? I think we're at time, but I just want to see if there's any other questions from you all before we close out. There's got to be another question.
I can call on somebody, Cami.
No, we don't need to do that, but I know it was a speedy presentation, right? Or do we have 10 more minutes?
Please, have you loaded the documents now? Can we
I
see?
haven't because I'm still online with you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
After we log off, I'll put them up.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
I do have one question.
Great, yes.
So when we're doing undergrad research or thinking about doing undergrad research, what type of things should we be like really paying attention to, or yeah, should we be paying attention to like use for actual graduate research? Like what, how am I trying to word this? I'm on my
I think you're trying to ask, like, what are those skills that you're getting from the research experiences that could translate to grad school? Is that what you're asking? I think she might be not able to unmute, but I think that's what she's asking. In which case, I think as an undergrad, you take the research experiences that you can get. And I know depending on the type of institution you're at, you may not have exactly what it is that you're hoping to do in graduate school. So in my example, I went to a regional college in Oklahoma, Southwestern Oklahoma State University. And, there's very limited amount of research that's available. And so, I did research on zebrafish and circadian rhythms, which had nothing to do with anything that I was interested in the future. I did some research on some kind of drug, and it was kind of organic problem, organic approach to the question, and I had to eventually go out and kind of find a biological chemistry project at another institution to kind of get that type of opportunity, which we don't always get that chance to do. And so what faculty want to see in these, applications is that you tried research, that you did research, and that you committed to it for a substantive period of time. So, committing to full-time research over the summer, that you've, been in research for a year or two, during your undergrad experience, or for those that are all-stars, more than that. And so, they want to see that you've tried it, that you know what you're getting into, that this is, they also want to see that you failed, right? That you've not always been perfect, and that's okay, because in research, 90+% of these experiments are going to fail, and so you have to be comfortable with that uncomfortable, right, part of things. And I think that as scholars of color, the experience, the lived experiences that you all have are going to prepare you for, of course, that type of experience. So anyway, from the technical side of things, right, there may be things that are very translatable, right, depending on what field you were in. Maybe you did microscopy, right, like that could be applied to many different projects. Or maybe you did, I don't know, trying to think about, like, I don't know, protein analysis. Or maybe you did, like, the stuff in my lab is like so specific to eye field, of course, like that's not necessarily translatable, but there are aspects of it that could be. And so you want to pull those things out, but really then there's those other skills that you learned. And so that's things like being independent in the lab, right? Are you able to take a protocol and run with it? Or are you comfortable in designing a project, right? Like that design of the experiment, that's really important skill. Are you comfortable doing data analysis and being able to, come to some type of conclusion from that research? So those are all things that you could learn from those research experiences that can be applied to anything that you might do as a graduate student, even if it's not related specifically, in the same aligned field. So hopefully that answers your question on that.
It does. Thank you. Sorry for not being able to articulate my question.
No worries. No worries. No worries. I heard you had distractions. That's how it goes when we're on Zoom. Is there any final questions before we close out? Go ahead and unmute if you want to ask a question, or do the raise your hand and I can call on you. And I'll just remind you while I'm waiting for someone to be brave and ask a question, please do reach out to me, contact me on, over email or through any of the social medias. I love to hear from LSAMP scholars. I'm an LSAMP alum. There's been many LSAMP scholars from previous LSMRCE conferences who've reached out to me, and we go over their personal statement, and I'm happy to provide feedback on those, or even just conversations about, like, should I go to graduate school? Is this a right fit for me? So I would love to hear from you after the conference as well. So please do be in touch. I stall long enough to get any final questions? Anybody brave want to unmute? Okay, if not, then thank you all so much for being here with me today and talking about the personal statement or statement of purpose, whichever one you want to call it. I wish you all the best of luck in applying for graduate school. I can't wait to hear where you're going. So again, please do be in touch because I know that LSAMP scholars go on to really amazing things. So thank you so much.
Cami, thank you on behalf of all the future scholars in the Zoom session here. Thank you for giving them a boost in their journey. Everybody, thanks for coming by. I do want to just remind you that there is a survey associated with either today's session or the conference as a whole. And forgive me, I'm not sure myself, but do follow up with the survey responses when asked. All right, Cami, thank you very much.
All right,
Everybody
thank
else,
you.
good luck.
The slides
Thank
will be
you.
available online.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.